Okay, so we're going to be talking about our finalised ideas for post-production and how we're going to be going forward with the editing process. First of all, we're going to talk about shot ordering and how we're going to incorporate the desk shots into the shots that we now have of our forest. So just to update you and give you like a refresh on what our plan is, we're basically having a chronological order of a woman walking into a forest, and in this we're going to intercut scenes of a desk shot. So our first idea was just to sort of have the desk scene like sparsed into and thrown around within it, but we've sort of come as we're filming it to realise that that may not be the best idea, and that to actually have between the natural cuts that we have where we weren't filming the woman walk to the forest, have that desk shot appear there. So like we don't know which one of those we're going to go for yet, but they're definitely the two that we've sort of narrowed it down to, and the two ideas that we're going to sort of work upon most.
I think that it's going to be quite interesting to see in the editing process. We want to focus on the length of the shots and if we're going to have to speed up or slow anything down, if we're going to have to discard any footage. And I think it's also going to be important that we look at transitions between shots, because if we just have cuts, it's not going to build as much suspense as, say, a custom transition will. So I think that'll be quite interesting to have to look at and discuss between us.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've got our raw footage filmed, it's clear that the music that we may have chosen before might not match up as well with the things that we were thinking of and the shots that we've done. So in the setting it's definitely more
applicable if we use some sort of different sound. So one of the ways that Frankie and Sophie suggested we could come around this was if we use some of the sound samples that we used before originally, because it was actually quite difficult to find full-length pieces of music that really conveyed the same feelings. So Sophie and Frankie, I think you want to talk more about how we're going to use the soundscape, and then Alex, you're going to talk about how we're using the original music samples.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so Frankie and Sophie, do you want to...
I think that it would be an interesting idea to explore making our own soundscape, because it's so hard to find things online that are royalty-free yet still comply with the ideas that we've got, and we kind of don't want to make it a box-ticking exercise, so we're just picking something for the sake of it and adding it in, and it's good, like, because music is make or break, is one very important aspect of what we're doing, so we need to make sure that we get music completely right. And maybe the way that we've got to do that is create our own soundscape and look into how we can do that online. And even though it might take a bit more time, it's going to be a lot better in the long run than to just kind of take something off of the internet that somebody else has made for free. And generally free stuff's going to be better than paid stuff, so it's going to look good on our part if we've got a soundscape.
Yeah, but equally we need to take into consideration that we might not have the skill set needed to create our own soundscape. So Alex, I think you were talking about how we're reusing and repurposing music that we found.
What we're going to need to do, we're going to need to start it at the scene where our victim walks out of her house, and at points we may even need to cut it out to build suspension, or heck, maybe even cut it off early.
Yeah, so we'll sort of not use the music from start to finish just as an overlay. We'll sort of have parts taken out and interchanged with other pieces of song and other pieces of music material, just to add sort of more suspense, because a lot of the music that we found was actually quite useful, but we found out that when you listen to it as a whole over the top of the raw footage, it just wasn't really like there, and that it just wasn't the best way to describe it obviously would be that it's just sort of monotonous, and it just became sort of like not something that added to it, but just something that was there, as Sophie said, as just a boxing exercise, so that we could go, yep, we've got music in our like production, and we followed one of the main like sort of points that you need in a production. And then finally we were going to talk about transitions and how we were going to use them. So you did already?
No, it's fine. We wanted to think about transitions, so we're not just using what we've already got. As I said earlier, we're going to need to think about the most effective transition and how to make it look professional and not just, because whilst just cuts between shots are going to look the most professional method, instead of maybe sometimes how some dissolves or fade outs can look a bit naff, we want to make sure that we've got the right resources and the right transitions. We're going to need to have a quite a big look into it to make sure that the transitions between the desk shots and the forest shots are clear, but they also look good, and they actually build suspense instead of just showing this is one scene, this is another.
Yeah, so it's sort of like about finding that balance again between like trying to follow the conventions and look professional and sort of doing something that's somewhat interesting and being creative. But obviously we can't, as Sophie said, just do a dissolve, because it could end up looking really like amateur and really like sort of, as Sophie said again, naff, and just won't look right. So we can't just stick with the jump cuts, however, because they aren't really interesting enough and they won't create like a good like new and like creative way to cut between the two scenes. So I think
yeah. Also, like with the narrative, keeping it like quite a linear narrative, we need to make sure that the transitions and stuff kind of link the different shots together and make it like more smooth, which can be quite difficult, but it will be something that we can make sure that we look at during editing. And
yeah, so it's again something that we need to take into account. I think we've pretty much covered everything we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I think we've got it.
Okay, so thank you for listening.